everyone. Welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers, seekers of happiness and joy, seekers of a centered approach to success in life, seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation. We're so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
Well, I got summoned for jury duty.
Oh, no.
Everyone reacts like, oh no, but I think it would be kind of fun.
Oh, this is where we pivot.
Oh, well, so I got some, I was on a jury like when I was like, I think like 21 or 22. And
Oh my gosh.
well, so many people's like jury duty stories are that they like get summons for jury duty and then they have to like whatever,
Bail.
call in every day or whatever,
Yeah.
and then just nothing happens.
Yeah.
But for me, I actually got like onto an actual jury. I was like selected for the jury, and then we had a trial, and we listened to like all the tests, like all the testimony and
Huh.
and everything, and I thought it was really fascinating.
You did.
Yeah, I really liked it.
I'm proud of you.
And then so that part was really interesting, but the part I found most interesting is we had to go as a jury and deliberate,
Yes.
and then we had to like give a verdict, right?
Yeah.
And again, I was young. I was like, I think
Right.
again,
I was just
21.
thinking that, like, that's kind of crazy that you'd get picked for a jury at that young.
Yeah, I don't know. Right, I don't know why. But to me, at the time, all of my jury peers were like old. They were probably in their 40s or
30s.
50s.
They were 30. Oh my God, they were 30.
So I was like feeling like, like I was a kid
Yeah, you were a kid.
amongst all of these
Yeah, mature
like,
people.
adults.
Yeah.
And we get into the jury room and everyone's like, kind of like, we're looking at each other and kind of hemming and hawing. And I'm like looking around and I'm like, shouldn't we figure out if this person's guilty? What?
Yeah.
And so I ended up leading the discussion and the deliberation because no one was stepping up to lead it.
May I just interject a question at this stage of the story?
Uh-huh.
Was this like something with high stakes? Was this like somebody was reusing coupons that expired, or
No.
was this like something with some serious consequence?
It was a little serious. It was like an assault case.
Oh.
Yeah, someone
Okay.
assaulted a coworker
Oh, okay.
at
I will
work.
not make fun
and-
of that anymore. That's terrible.
No, I mean it was.
Yeah.
I mean it wasn't great,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't like a murder case.
Right. Yeah. But still.
Yeah, it was like an act of violence, so we had to figure out.
Yeah.
So there was like I felt there was like some seriousness and consequence to our decision.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, that's really interesting. So what happened?
Well, I started like trying to lead the group
Yeah.
through figuring out how we're gonna have a consensus, right?
Mm.
Like we've got to get everybody on
Mhm.
the jury
Right.
to agree to like guilty or not guilty,
Right.
or else it's a hung jury, right? If we
Yeah.
can't come to consensus. And so I just thought it was a really interesting process. Like, how do you get people to arrive at a consensus?
Yes. Oh, that's a
And
good
we have to do that
topic.
all the time, right?
Yeah.
We have to do that all the time in our jobs.
Yes. Well, that actually is one of my major jobs, is to help teams reach consensus if there's any problems, or help people. Yeah, it's a great
Yeah.
topic. And I think it's a topic that you can use in a whole host of ways in your life. You know,
Yes.
learning how to
Personally,
manage.
how do we get consensus around what we're having for dinner tonight? Which is harder than my jury job was
Well,
sometimes.
I think everybody comes with an agenda, you know? And I say that all the time. Nobody likes to use that
Yeah.
word. Like, they think it's a bad word, but
but every single person on this planet has their own agenda. They all have their
Yeah.
own needs that they're trying to get
Yep.
met, right? And then you
Mhm.
collect with more than one person, and you're lucky if everything aligns in the stars and you agree on everything, but it's not likely.
Yeah. Yeah, the interesting thing, in contrast to kind of like the jury
Yeah,
situation where like you kind of got to get everyone to agree on one thing.
yeah,
To me, like consensus at work doesn't necessarily mean everyone like absolutely maybe like agrees with what we're doing,
right.
but
Yeah,
we all are collectively deciding
yeah,
of the options, this is the best one, and we're all going to go and support that one thing.
yeah. Even if it's not what we would have wanted.
Mhm.
Yes, that is the key, I think, to that the word consensus. I think that's really true. Is being able to feel like you lost, but not feel like you
Yeah.
lost.
Yeah, it's not being right,
Yeah.
which a lot of discussions are around just trying to
Yeah.
have, be
Yeah.
right, feel like you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because as I'm reflecting on this, I'm like putting things in two buckets. I'm putting it in the personal bucket, like how I reach consensus or reach for consensus with people around me
Mm-hmm.
as a participant, but I'm also thinking about it as a facilitator. And I'm having a hard time in this moment separating the two. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Because you could
But
look
like,
at it one way and say,
like
oh,
you're
wait a minute.
facilitating yourself. You're
Yeah.
like over facilitating
Or I'm
yourself.
facilitating the group we're trying to collectively choose
Yeah.
on. I'm trying to
Yeah.
facilitate to my end, which is not right.
Yeah, only use your superpowers for good.
Well, what do you think are the components of having consensus? Like, what do you think needs to be present?
Well, first, in any group, in order to reach a consensus, I think you have to have like trust within the group.
Mm. That's
Uh,
interesting. Yeah.
And you have to have a group of people who actually do want to make a collectively good decision.
That's really important. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a great
'cause
one.
again, I've been in groups where you might have an individual or two whose primary goal is, again, to be right.
Or to win.
And so they will dig in and advocate for their position
Yeah.
at the expense of like the entire exercise. It'll take forever.
Right. That definitely happens, doesn't it? I think that's
Mhm.
that's a really good one. I think the other thing that has to be present is a range of what a win would look like for the team,
Mhm.
like a visual or an intel or an agreement about what the end goal, would be around.
Mhm.
I think that's another really big one because that gets lost in the shuffle super fast.
Mm. Yeah, we've got a guy at work, John, that does an amazing job whenever we're in this kind of group consensus discussion
Yeah.
of making sure that we are understanding what the end goal is.
He is
So, yeah,
really gifted at that.
like you
Yeah.
everything gets lost in the weeds for a little while, and then he's so good at pulling it back up and say, "Hey, gang, we're working on this big project over here. Remember, this is the goal."
Yeah. Yeah.
So I agree. That's an important part.
Yeah. I also think another really, really, really important part is neutrality, is having and stating everyone working towards being neutral in their emotions as you're choosing. Because I think people get really wound up about things. Just like when they talk about conflict resolution, like the way out of conflict is not to go deeper into detail. The way to get out of conflict is to go more general. And we talk about that on the pod all the time.
Yeah.
And consensus is very much needing neutrality and generality sometimes, most of the time, actually.
Yeah. And what sparked there for me is you're going kind of into the emotional part.
Mhm.
It's like like it's not maybe you against your peers.
Hmm.
It's kind of like the group against the problem. But
That's a really, yeah, yeah,
when you start talking and deliberating with each other, it almost becomes personal.
yeah.
And
I like
if
how
I'm
you
not
said
being
that.
heard, then they don't like me. And, then you kind of start spiraling and things can
Hmm.
get pretty emotional
Yeah.
when you're in a discussion. And sometimes, at work, at home, sometimes these stakes are pretty high.
Hmm. I agree. And yeah, I like that how you said it's not me against you or you against them. It's the group against the problem. That's
Hmm.
such a good frame. Just if everybody could have that frame all the time, the world would be a
Yeah.
happy place. Could you imagine American politics today if we looked at it like that? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
world hunger, disagreement, and whatever. Like, if
Yeah.
you think about that, it's kind of an amazing, such an easy concept to say, and so incredibly deep and
Hmm.
hard to do sometimes. I think too the emotions also get high when you are really feel like the solution that you bring or the component that you're bringing to the party is specific and accurate and detailed and
Mm.
highly intellectual or intelligent.
Hmm.
Like, I know this is right. So sometimes it's not even about ego. It's not even about the person having the credit. The person is so hell-bent on it being accurate,
Hmm.
and they can fight tooth and nail for the accuracy of something rather than the global benefit of something.
Hmm. Yeah, that is very interesting. Like, there's some folks that have a really good gut on things, but they can't
Mhm.
explain why. And
Yeah.
then there's, like you said, these others that are very detailed and have all the facts, but maybe
Yeah.
are don't have the whole picture because they're so focused on the detail. So,
Yeah.
um, when moderating those two kinds of people, it's important to give both some
Yeah.
kind of equal clout.
Or even if you're trying to reach a consensus with someone, knowing which side of the house they're on, those two descriptions were so
Hmm.
good. Like, knowing which side of the house they're on can help inform you about how to work with them to
Hmm.
reach a consensus. Like, for example, if you're dealing with somebody who's that more global gut reaction person, you just described me, by the way.
Hmm.
And if you and I are trying to reach consensus, the way you would win fast or make that consensus happen is to not dive into a bunch of analytical details. Like, going the opposite direction of what my natural energy is would throw me into a major tailspin because I would feel out of my element. I would feel that you're trying to beat me with detail.
Mhm.
I'm being silly, but that's true though, so, but if somebody's really, really detailed, and if you say to them, don't worry about it, it's okay, it'll be fine, the details don't matter. Like,
Oh yeah, right.
you're really minimizing the individual.
The other thing when coming up with consensus, that I like to keep on top of mind is just being curious.
Yeah, that's so good.
Really trying to explore what other people are thinking. And again, like as an introvert,
Yeah.
like I know that I'm gonna have to think to talk,
Yeah.
but I know when we're working in a group,
Mhm.
there's a bunch of folks that have to talk to think.
Yeah.
So me actually just helping them talk, and I can do that just by being curious, asking them questions, can
Mhm.
actually, I don't want to say like manipulate them, but like a lot of
No.
times, like they need to think it through
Yes.
verbally in order to get to maybe the conclusion that
Yeah. Yeah.
that we all want to get to, or else, and if you don't allow them to talk, they'll get stuck.
And frustrated
Mm-hmm.
because that's how they feel they're being understood, as if
Yep.
they can talk.
Yep. So
Yeah.
kind of like
And you know what,
as a
JJ,
facilitator, reading the room a little bit on
yeah.
who needs help thinking through this problem.
Yeah, you are really good at that piece. You are really good at that piece. You will ask very specific questions that will guide the discussion. You've done that for years. I also think there's a couple of things to keep in mind. Like, if you have something to do with facilitating the conversation or the consensus, I think, I think there's a couple of things to keep in mind before you even start. And I think it's worth mentioning right now. Like, I think one of the things is you have to check your energy.
Mm.
You have to check what you're coming in with. If you're coming in with the guard up
Mhm.
because you're worried that you're not going to reach consensus, everybody feels that, and it sets a tone. It immediately sets a tone.
I would back you up there 1 second. Not that you're worried that you're not going to reach consensus.
Yeah.
You're worried that the group's not going to agree with you.
Or not even necessarily. Well,
No? Maybe.
maybe, but
Yeah.
not always. You could just be worried that they won't reach a consensus or that a
Mhm.
decision will not be made.
Mm-hmm.
Not even that it has to be you, but that if there's high stakes, if it's a work situation
Mhm.
or if it's a family something rather in which there's a timeline involved or an outcome that matters, if you know that the dynamic in this group could oftentimes go amiss and consensus can't be made without hard feelings, you might feel really amped up about it emotionally
Mhm.
before you even start because you're using all your past experiences to make a decision about how you assume it's going to go.
Mhm.
So I think sending your own energy. So just check yourself. Like, can you have some neutrality about that? Can you be more, even hopeful, like, or
Mhm.
expecting that the consensus will be reached easily? I think that's a really important thing. And I don't think people do that. I think they come in with their agenda lit up.
Mhm.
And then it can actually look like they are trying to win when they might not
Yeah.
be. They
Yeah.
may be, and that's not what we want either. But yeah.
The other thing I think then, and you kind of touched on it, is sometimes when we have to make a decision as a group, it feels, or the fear is that it's going to take a long time.
Right.
Like it's inefficient or something. Like
Yeah.
how many times have you come across someone who's like, I should have asked the group, but I just decided anyway because I wanted to go faster.
Yeah. Nobody
Right,
says that.
No one says that.
Or they
I do
might.
that. Oh, I personally do that quite a bit.
Okay.
That's a thing that actually I'm kind of conscious of because sometimes I'll just make a snap decision for our org
Yeah.
and we'll just move forward. And then later I'll think, shoot, that should have been a group decision.
Oh, okay. So yeah, which brings me to another thing to realize, which I didn't realize until just this moment. Is it also, you also have to check what your role is in the group. Because if you are someone with higher influence or the dad or the mom or the decision maker, that automatically puts you in a different place than the others. So how do you manage that emotionally? Like I think that's a thing too is, because I'm trying to balance the conversation between like, well, if that's what I meant when we first got on. It's like, well, if I'm not the facilitator, if I'm just me and my family trying to figure out where we're going to go on vacation, and I really want to see the sunshine, and nobody else wants to, they want to go skiing. You
have just described every spring break discussion we've had. And we end up in Colorado. My poor wife.
And we end up in Florida. My poor family. But I think that has something to do with that too, right? Because you're right. Depending on your role in the team or the group, you will have a different level of influence over creating that consensus, or maybe even saying what the end goal is, which brings me, I think, to the next point before you even get into something is I always try to review two things. And I subconsciously used to do this, and now I'm really conscious that I do it. And that is, in my mind's eye, I kind of try to think what we're starting with. Like, where is everybody? How is, what's the situation? How do we get here? What is it? Where is everybody with that? And then the second thing I review in my mind's eye is, what's a good end goal? Is there only one? Or does an iteration of this end goal, would that work? Or does it have to look like a really specific thing? Because I think if you just take a moment to review that non-emotionally, it gives you a lot more latitude to be able to be flexible, to, choose energy to help guide discussions, all of that. So I think those are really important parts.
When you talk about the end goal, that part is so hard sometimes
Yeah.
um uh, because how do you define the end goal without it being too precise? Then that's the trap I always try to keep our team out of
Mm.
is like
Yeah.
when we're working on a problem, we can't say the end goal is like a precise result
Mm-hmm.
because we're trying, but maybe it's more like a ballpark or a core value or something a little
Oh,
more
sure.
obscure. So
Yeah.
that when we're discussing it, we can come up with multiple
Mm.
ways to get there. It
Yeah.
increases the creativity if
Yes.
you're not so precise on the end goal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good too. I like that.
But that's
I,
hard to do. As a facilitator, you actually have to think about that quite a bit and
yeah.
not get stuck in there is one result we're trying to
The
get
detail.
to. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think another thing that's really important too is before you get into the conversation, it's not a bad idea, depending on what the group is and what you're trying to solve. It's not a bad idea to ask permission to shift the energy or the direction of something if it starts to go too much into a direction that's not supportive of the end goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think stating that whenever I go into difficult conversations that we're trying to negotiate and navigate something and get it taken care of, I will say that. I'll say, with all due respect, I'm going to ask permission that if anybody starts getting too squirrely, and I kind of even make a little joke about it, that I will interrupt and bring you back. And it's no disrespect on you, and it's not because I think you're right or wrong. I'm just telling you at the beginning, before we even get anywhere, that that's a thing. Is that okay? Is everybody
I like
okay
That's a
with
great
that?
suggestion.
Because then you can, in the middle, you can say, okay, so this would be an example of what I was talking about. So let's, bring it back. No rabbit holes.
Yeah. Yeah, the rabbit hole thing is tough. We use this analogy when we're doing some planning things and really trying to like get buy-in with different groups is like what altitude are we flying at?
Oh, that's good.
Versus like a plane reference. But because sometimes what we're talking about is like real close to the ground. Like this is some like detail, this is some operation stuff.
The
it's
how.
Like yep. And sometimes we're talking like 30,000 feet view of our business, like way up there. And things are obscure and unclear and we can't really see the ground very well. But, so I always like to set a lot of these meetings, like what altitude are we at in this discussion?
Good. That's good. Yeah, I really like that. And then I think that there's, as you're kind of going through it, I'm just reviewing everything. I wrote a bunch of notes before we got on because I didn't want to forget anything. I also think too, one of the really important things is to keep checking in on everybody's energy. So when someone starts to give feedback or talk about their perspective on how it should be, the end, what the goal should be, I always pay attention to their energy and how much energy there is behind their commentary. Like I almost pay attention to that more than what their words are. Because if somebody comes in really hot, they're going to continue to build on that heat. And it's going to amplify to the point where that person may not feel like they're going to win no matter what. And so I always really try to be cautious about that and just pay attention to them because they may need your support. They may need your buy-in. They may need you to show a little more neutrality for them to help them come back down a little bit so that they can stay more present in the data being presented rather than the emotion.
Yeah.
Because emotions are usually what will spin people out of control right away. Or as it takes longer to try to figure out what you're trying to do.
So once you have facilitated this kind of conversation with everybody, to me, one of the most important parts is the end.
Yes.
Which is because like that's that's what we're trying to do. Like we're coming together, we're getting everyone's opinion, we're trying to make a really great decision on how to solve a problem or whatever our action plan is. And to me, I always like to set the stage is like consensus look, we need buy-in on the consensus. Like at the end of the day, whatever we all come up with as the plan,
Yeah.
like you don't necessarily have to agree with it, but you do have to commit to
Yes.
doing it with
Mhm.
the team.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a really, really good thing at the end. The other thing I think that's really good so like both of those things are key, is when we are reaching that consensus, it's like the golden rule of negotiating. Like, not one person should win, right? Because if you think about it, you're creating a long-term something going on here. The
Yeah.
decision that you're making, if there's individuals involved, more than two even, you're making some kind of long-range thing. You're making a decision.
Yep.
If the energy at the very beginning is wonky and unequal, it will never feel good.
Yeah.
So I think it's so important to recognize that. It's like you can't have a hard winner, because if there's a hard winner, there's a hard loser.
Mhm.
And that person will never, ever feel able to be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you recognize that, everyone has to have something in there that they feel good about, that is really key. And I think
Mhm.
then it makes it way easier to do what you're talking about, is to say, I didn't get everything, but I get this is what's best for the team, so I'm going to support that. Makes
Yeah,
it
and-
easier to reach that place.
I would say that for any of our young leaders
Yeah.
listening, that
Mhm.
when you do come to a group consensus and you are in that manager leadership kind of role,
Yeah.
sometimes it's really easy if you're talking to one of your employees, one of your colleagues, and they're maybe complaining about the decision, to
Yeah.
say, well, I agree with you. I don't think that was the right way to go, but that's what the group did. To not do
Right.
that. I mean, that is
Oh, I totally agree. That's such a
like,
good
it's
point.
easy to want to do that, and I
Mhm.
get why you want to do that,
Yeah.
but you got to frame it like, yep, that's what we decided, and this is how we're going to move forward.
Right.
And here's why. You can talk about why we decided it,
Yeah.
but you got to stand by the decision of the group, especially if it's with your leadership peers.
Oh, I totally agree. That's such a good point. Because a lot of times I think in youthful exuberance, you think that you want to make sure you point something out because you think that you had the better idea or you're in
Mhm.
charge or whatever. But actually it doesn't look like that. When you say
Mhm.
stuff like that, it doesn't make you look good. It makes you look like a defector at too high of a level. Like, why is this person not on board? This makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah,
I don't think people realize how that
Yeah.
shows up sometimes. That's such a good point. Yeah.
totally.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I think come into play when we're trying to reach consensus, and it very seldom has just to do with the facts.
Yeah, so I like all of this, just being patient, being curious,
Yeah.
watching the emotions, watching your emotions, watching other people's emotions.
Yeah.
And even if I think you're not the official facilitator of
Yeah.
it, you can help
Yes.
facilitate. You can be a supporter of the facilitation.
Yeah.
It doesn't have
Yeah.
to take forever. Sometimes me and my team can reach consensus in a few minutes. It
Yeah.
doesn't need to be hard.
Exactly.
It doesn't
Well,
have to be a big thing.
Yeah, and I think like what you were saying too is trust is something that you said at the very beginning, and I think that's hard. You can reach a consensus without trust, but it takes longer.
Yep.
And if you're working with the same group over and over again, having to make different decisions, exactly what you're saying. That trust will grow your speed in which you can act and decide.
Yeah. Yeah, trust
Even
and like emotional safety, right?
Yes.
Like we all know we're not going to attack each other, and
Yeah.
we can just attack the problem.
Yeah. That's
So.
so good.
Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well.
Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and there's always further to go. And it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation and share this episode with them. We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring, seekers.